Hello everybody and welcome to the Nobbs Suzuki primer conversation, every little bit. My name is Alicia Jones and I'm going to be talking to my mentor and teacher for many years, Mr. John Nobbs.
Howdy.
Hello. John is a prolific writer and we've got a series of questions and conversations to come out of this book, every little bit, that John had printed last year. And I'm going to ask questions and make observations, I guess, from my position as I'm a performer. I'm a performer in John's company, but I also am a teacher and direct work as well. So my lens of questions is going to be through those series of experiences, I guess. And I will just go through, I've made a series of notes and questions that may be a little ambiguous or it certainly require an in-depth conversation.
Sure.
Okay.
Of course.
So the chapter begins, the space between same and different. And the chapter begins really about you talking your experience in 1994 in Dionysus.
Mm-hmm.
And I wondered, at first I just wanted people to understand, if you could explain, the feeling of, well, maybe you have to set the scene as to what the theatre is, but also what is the feeling for the actor in performing in such a historical place?
Well, when I was with Tadashi Suzuki in his company, I was one of two Western actors speaking English in his Japanese company called Suzuki Company of Toga, which is based in the mountains of Japan, and in many ways Suzuki does a lot of classic texts, but he does it in his own fashion, and he does classic texts which are both some Japanese texts but also a lot of Western texts. So he does Shakespeare, he does Greeks, and Dionysus is his version of the Bacchae, which is a famous play by Sophocles, one of the top three anyway, and he's done his own take on it. It's a stunning version. I performed it in Japan and also throughout the world in Italy and actually some stages in Canada. We also performed it in Greece in '95 at the Herodes Atticus, which is of course the base of the Parthenon. So here am I on stage and I look up there and I can actually see the Parthenon. So to be a member of a company which is a modern Japanese theatre company doing a classical Greek text in a very modern way and be one of two Western actors is a pretty extraordinary coagulation of events.
Yeah.
Suzuki's a very demanding director, and he's created a type of actor training called the SMAT, S-M-A-T, Suzuki Method of Actor Training, of which the NSP, which is the stuff that we do together, is our westernised version. It has all the same core values, but also spreads it out a bit to make it more accessible to a Western actor in mind. So I found myself in this amazing place, and he's very demanding. And I guess this took me years to come up with this idea of same and different, because Suzuki's extremely intelligent, and sometimes he'll say things, he'll say it's terrible, he'll say it's good, and you can't really know what he's talking about. And for the life of me, when he said things like that to me, I had no idea of how to deal with it. And I eventually came to the conclusion, because if you do the same thing all the time, he goes nuts. And if you do different things just for changing it, he goes nuts too. So how do you get caught between these two spaces? And I suddenly, I suppose, gradually realised that this place between same and different is very equivalent to, I guess you could say, particle theory for things like quantum mechanics. If you look at light can behave as a particle, but also behaves as a wave. And for many years in the sort of advent of electricity, nobody actually understood how to sort of deal with this until Einstein came up with the idea of, well, actually they're both the same, they're different sides of the same coin, you could say. So this idea something should be the same and can be different at the same time is not a truth, it's not a scientific truth, it's actually an attitude. So I realised, and I actually haven't had the chance to test it with Suzuki since, because it took me 10 years and I haven't really worked with Suzuki since 1999 is the last time I worked with him directly as an actor. So, and I was trying to work out how you have these people, and it's interesting. I just changed another corollary there, because you have Jackie. Jackie's my wife and fellow artistic partner, and when Jackie's rehearsing somebody like Alicia, she'll say, I want you to go deeper, I want you to go deeper, I want you to go deeper. And if I came into the room, I'd say, well, actually, you also should be wider as well. And he'd go, oh, which one of these things do I do? Because I've got
to please both.
To Jackie or to John. And so, for instance, Shane had the same issue last night. We were filming something else, and Jackie was saying one thing, I was saying the other. And actually, you have to actually do both. Because it's really an attitude we're talking about, not a factual thing. It's not a fact-based thing. It's actually a way of thinking about what you do.
So when I read this, and of course through my experience with yourself and Jackie, and the often, or not necessarily opposite, but exactly what you just said, Danny, and your own ambivalence, if that's the right word, when you're working with Suzuki and not being sure exactly if you were doing the thing that he wanted or not, because sometimes you get feedback and sometimes you don't. It made me think about, all performers at their heart, are they anxious beings?
I think so, yes.
Because I feel like, and I feel like it plays into a huge level of anxiety of not knowing.
You think plays into, or actually assuages it, calms it down? What are you saying?
That's interesting. Because I often wonder if this style suits me because I have high anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And so it does calm me down.
Mm-hmm. Anchors you, so to speak.
Yeah.
Grounds you, what we say.
Yeah.
Say it again.
But I wonder, like I was just interested.
But I think all performers are anxious. Everybody is, because nobody knows.
Yeah.
Nobody knows if they're a good performer. Nobody knows if they're successful.
Yeah.
They depend on the audience's reaction to a certain extent. But even that can be ambivalent, can't it be? Sort of, they can love you, but you're still not very good, or vice versa. And so there's always got to be a massive doubt in the actor or any artist's mind, because they're going to think, am I as good as I say I am? Am I as good as I want to be? And all of those things are a very important part of the process of an actor, because if you're complacent, of course, if you're an artist and complacent, you really can't go anywhere because you're finished.
Mm.
So I think it's a necessary part of the temperament of a performer to be anxious. But this actually, what this does, this attitude is same and different. It goes from being either or, as in yes or no, or black and white, good or bad, to something that's much more usable, much more practical. Because you say to the audience, well, what am I, rather than sort of trying to please them. You're in quite a different space, aren't you? So if I think of the same and different, rather than this thing of I'm good or bad, or I'm acting well or I'm not acting well, it becomes quite a different experience, doesn't it? It becomes a much more sort of artistic growth experience rather than some sort of switch that goes yes or no.
There's a sense of freedom because there's no absolute of you can't get this wrong. And so the same but different means I'm on the right track, but what else is there potentially around that area that I'm playing in? And
I realised that the people, so there's another thing, so if you someone like Kubrick, Stanley Kubrick, the film director, who was famous for taking a long time to make films. He would take sort of 50 takes of opening the door or stuff. And a lot of people say, well, that's very boring, etc. Why does he bother, blah, blah, blah. But there's an interesting thing. So I'll say, so he's got Jack Nicholson walking down the corridor about to do something, and he's about to go into this bar to have a conversation with a non-existent person, as it turns out. And as he's walking down, he does this amazing, this shrug, this enormous thing, and you can't really work out whether he meant to do it or whether he did it because he hated Kubrick for making him do so many takes, or Kubrick wanted. There's a million things like that. And I bet I'm saying Kubrick was watching, and then he suddenly thought this thing was, it was the same, but it was actually a bit different. Because he's still walking down the corridor. Yeah. He's not skipping down or running or anything like that. So ostensibly you have this same experience, and yet there's this other little thing on top of it which actually makes it, it's like the cream on the cake.
Yeah.
And suddenly, oh, that's what I knew, that little other different thing. So these, it's not the same or different, it's the same and different, if that makes sense. So it's an attitudinal shift to saying, no, I'm not just going to change everything. No, I'm just going to keep everything. I'm going to be in that space between the two. And this is a space you're talking to. You can't prove it. You can't show it. But you say, I'm actually going to be in that space between same and different. Now, I'm not sure even if Suzuki wants that. I don't care really, because the point is it was an inspirational kickoff point. And I came to this idea that can I do the same thing with a different attitude, or a different thing with the same attitude?
Yeah. Because sometimes I watch you when you come in the room when you're calling certain exercises, and you're often not watching us. Mm-hmm. You often have your head down and you're listening to us. Mm-hmm. And I often wonder if two things. A, you've been doing this for so long, you've seen a whole heap of performers. There's not that much different that goes on. But to hear the difference in the person's voice is maybe far more interesting?
I think so. I mean, I'm not saying that first is true, and they're both true actually, but the important thing for me actually is I'm trying to feel the space. I could argue that I'm actually trying to feel it, because often when you see something, your mind, as we all know, can be your eyes are very deceptive. You can look at somebody and go, oh, they fell over, or you can say, oh, they look really good. And that's quite a deceptive thing, because it doesn't feel what they are or what the group is, which is more important. So I often talk about the plasma of the performers as they go through these routines. And I realised I used to stare at it and try and work out what it is by staring at it. But actually, if you avert your eyes and actually try and feel it, I think it's much more instructive. I'm not going to say this is an instinctive thing I'm doing rather than something that's deliberate anyway.
Yeah.
And I think that's very important, that you actually just, what's the feeling of the space? What's the feeling made by that? Or what's the feeling that I'm getting from the actors? Because those exercises I've developed, the NSP exercise, have all come from me sort of sitting there going, oh, what is this thing I'm feeling, rather than looking at them and seeing whether they're very competent or gifted or talented. I'm trying to get to another situation. So, because Jackie used to say, why don't you look at them? You know, in front of you doing stuff, why don't you look at them? I go, well, actually, I can argue I'm feeling them. So, and you're probably right, the A part is, I've seen it a lot before, so I don't really need to see it again.
Yeah.
Because it's all not dissimilar to what I've seen before. But the feeling's got to be different, because the number of people in the space and where they've gone to. So that's an instinctive thing. But it's the same sort of thing. I'm trying to feel the same but different.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
In some ways I feel like I know the answer to this, but in terms of our audience and viewers and their level of experience or training or understanding, I'm unaware. So I'm interested if you can, I don't know if you can unpack more or be a little bit or quite specific and distinct around the benefit of same and different for the performer, for the audience, and for the director.
Well, I think the benefits for the actor is they're moving into a space that's not finite. It's not fixed. It's not, oh, I know what this is. Part of the problem with any actor is to be too conscious. And really, when you're conscious, say, I know what I'm doing, I'm this. But actually, the thing that makes an actor interesting is not the obvious, I know, but I'm feeling something different. I'm actually in this interesting thing. I'm in a zone which is not known, but it's not unknown. So I often say that a performer should have, or performance should have, both knowledge and mystery. Knowledge so that the audience can trust that the actors can either do their pirouettes or high C's or say the words properly. But actually what's really amazing about a performance is that magical something that happens outside of the knowledge, which we call mystery or charisma. And you're trying to get to that space, because that's the thing that moves the audience. So for the actor to be able to get into that space means they're actually in a much more shamanistic or transformational zone, where the audience will get these powerful feelings. Now for the director, so you've got the audience, you've got the actor, of course. The actor's trying to get themselves to a space where they're actually going, wow, I've just opened another door. I haven't just closed the room off and finished painting the room. Oh, there's another door there, and I can go into that door, and maybe there's something interesting on the other side of it, which of course implies that there's something new going on, but actually they're not losing what they already have. So this is the same and different, isn't it? Because as an actor, you've actually got to keep what you are and then do something more, don't you? You can't just rob Peter to pay Paul. You can't lose what you are. And we often see this. Have you ever seen a performance where the person is about to start singing and they're there, and then suddenly they sing or they act or they dance, and actually they're not there anymore. They aren't there. The stuff is, the song is, the dancing is, or the acting is, but actually they've sort of disappeared. So what happens is that they've lost themselves to gain this other thing. So it's not interesting for the audience to lose something because something's just been taken away. And so there's no net gain. You've actually sort of taken this thing away and replaced it with something else. So what we're talking about is actually, I'm going to be John Nobbs, I'm going to be John Nobbs doing this thing, but then I'm also going to be John Nobbs doing this thing and other stuff as well. And that's what the audience finds compelling. It's suddenly going, oh, wow. You know, it's like a joke. Wow. And now, and there's more. And, what was that? That's something. So the audience is a much more sort of perceptive zone where they're suddenly being amazed and wonderment happening because, they're not just what they were, but there's more to it than that. So it's a journey for them as well. So the same and different is I'm the same as what I was, but I'm also different too. You know, we all keep our sense of what we are, but then we're also something new as well, aren't we? You know, like 3 weeks later, you're still Alicia Jones, but actually you know something more. Yeah. And that's the important part of living. It's an important part of growth, isn't it? To actually be what you are, but also be open to change and adapting to different situations. So for the director, I suppose, it's just a combination of those two things. They can see that this thing that they're making with the actor, then they can go, okay, I've got the actor there, I can make this other thing so I can support the actor or change the way the actor might be seen. So they're all interlinked, aren't they, I think? So, but especially maybe not for the director, but this idea, this umbilical cord between the actor or performer and the person watching is very, very, very important. And it's not a fixed thing like a stick between two people. It's actually moving, it's morphing, it's actually twisting, it's doing all those sorts of things. So the audience goes on a journey. They don't just sit there on a conveyor belt, starting at the A and go chug, 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 chug. But for the audience, it must go higher in value, higher in interest, higher in feeling, higher in being moved. And that implies that requires this delicate balance between same and different. Otherwise, if you're just the same, well, of course, no change. But if you're just different, there's no sense of what were you. Oh, so you've lost the thing you were, and to gain something else. I think, and I've certainly seen that. You know, you see this performance, and they look fine, and then they're singing, but there's nothing there. Yeah. And you've seen it, everybody's seen it, and that means they've lost something to gain something else. So as far as the audience is concerned, they haven't seen a journey. They've just seen this sort of gets off the bus and they've gone somewhere else. Yeah.
You talk about it. It's interesting. It's a bit of a bugbear for me personally as a performer, because we often talk about the conscious and unconscious, and so we have series of exercises with multiple variations on all of these great exercises, all with the aim to keep the ego attended to for unconscious movement to arise. But what if, this is for me directly personally, what if I have to go through that conscious movement to find the unconscious movement? So, say for example, sometimes, right? Head still.
Yep.
What if by me having my head on an angle, it enables me to find a different thing? But if I don't get to do it in the training room, how will I know? Because maybe I've got an extra barrier of consciousness that I actually have to work through.
Yeah, well, that's pretty true. I mean, you are a very conscious performer, much more so than most of the other performers that we know. I would say I'm the same.
Yeah.
Very similar, really. I'm not sure I can even answer that question.
Okay. Maybe that's just me sharing.
Well, it's true though. Why not? Because that's a very important point. But I think
because you and I talk about this conscious thing. Is it because I've been training for a long time now, 14 years.
14 years.
That my level of consciousness of what I'm doing, my body is doing, is highly developed because you've trained me so well.
To be aware too.
Yeah.
Part of consciousness is actually being aware of
Yeah.
stuff. You can't just be unaware.
Yeah. And so
your consciousness has gone up, or has it stayed the same? Is your unconscious going down? Is it going up?
I don't know. Is that for
Well, I
me
guess
to
in
know?
a sense that's only you can answer those things anyway. Because,
Okay.
as you know, our purview is to put you to a situation rather than sort of tell you how to get there.
Yeah.
I say for someone like yourself, you need far more. You need more extremity than most people. You need to be. We tend to use exhaustion as a way to not defeat
Yeah.
the ego, but to displace its primacy. So the problem for a performer is that their ego actually stands in the way of them understanding something. Ego says, "Oh, I want to be. I should be. This is what the audience wants." All those things. They're all very, very counterproductive, really. But they're very natural things to think. We all think that. How do you get to a stage where that you might be thinking that, but that's actually not affecting what you're doing? And so we're saying the ego's got to be present, but it must be secondary. So we're trying to encourage the unconscious, and by unconscious we mean dreamscape. Somebody said directed daydream, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Which is pretty good. The other day, that was a Jungian thing. Or your unconscious, your dream world, your imagination, those sorts of things which aren't factually based, but are based on the flights of fancy. And those are the things the audience really wants to see. But how do you get the ego to sort of be not getting in the way? So we say to the ego, go and sit over there and just tell me later.
Yeah.
But you've got a very pronounced consciousness, like I have actually. And I'm not sure we could ever get to the status that a lot of our other guys do because we're too conscious.
Yeah.
I guess I actually developed the exercises, I think, personally, so I could be less conscious.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure it's worked.
Okay.
But it's worked for everybody else. So.
Did you ever have thoughts of this or even inclinations of these type of concepts when you were dancing?
I think I certainly had an embryonic level. The reason I wrote the first book was because I had all these thoughts about Marlon Brando and Greta Garbo, which are all in this first book, which this is the fourth book, and the third in the Suzuki canon. Yes, I did. I think I did feel all those things, but I had no way to actually. I had no coat hanger which to put them on because until I met Suzuki and had the Suzuki training with its philosophical values, dancing doesn't allow that because dancing is essentially all unconscious. You cannot describe. Something I said you can't describe without reverting to mime that the person you're standing next to is the Swan Queen. You actually have to revert to mime. And so dancing itself by nature is unconscious. We don't know what people are thinking when they're dancing. And you can't dance a fact. You can only dance a sort of feeling or thought. So I think I had all these ideas. They were sort of bouncing around in there, and the idea of restraint, this idea of Marlon Brando with the pencil in his finger representing this massive energy but hardly describe. That came to me when that I could articulate that when Suzuki told the anecdote about the general being tough but not being fearful but not showing his fear. So I suppose all these things actually I had instinctively thought of them, and irrespective of the dancing. And as a dancer, I was always on that side of the footlights. I didn't make any exercise up. I did a bit of choreography, but I wasn't really a choreographer. So I didn't need the intellectual firepower, shall I say, to actually to direct things and to produce things. I was literally just a dancer. I was just a foot soldier. So, and until I met Suzuki, they couldn't have a proper form or a type of articulation.
Now that, well, you've met Suzuki, you worked with him for many years, you created the NSP, and now you work again with a lot of dancers, or a number of dancers.
Mm-hmm.
How does that concept translate to them? Is it a same? Can you just say to Jaden, same but different, Jaden, and he'll?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Is it more natural for a dancer to do that? Do you think?
I don't see why. I mean, it's more ambiguous, of course, because you can't. If I say to the last syllable of recorded time, well, actually, you know what that word means. And it's very easy to judge that word. If I say last syllable of recorded time, because that's a very different thing.
Yeah.
So it's probably easier to measure its effect, but I still think it's the same thing because, see, as a dancer or as any sort of performer who's doing a musical like Cats or something, you can do the same thing every night, really. And you have to make it new every night as well. So it's got to be new every night because, of course, otherwise you're just repeating yourself.
Yeah.
But it can't be different, of course, because you've got this stuff you've got to do that's the same as you've done every night because you've got the music the same, the notes have to be the same,
blocking,
all that stuff. So, of course, they've had to deal with that issue of same but different because they've got to make it live with themselves every night.
Yes.
But by the same token, they can't change it. So there it is. Anybody who's done a musical comedy for 2 years knows how do you make it work every night, and so that's part of it.
Yeah.
And for instance, if you're doing something like if you're punching somebody on stage, or not punching, but obviously pretending to punch, you can't just keep doing the same way because it'll actually become a parody of itself. You've got to work out how it's got some sort of internal knowledge or internal language, internal softness or restraint, all those things. So you have to make it different, but without changing, because of course you've got to make the impact on a certain thing.
Yeah.
But how to do it in such a way as actually it's got another life, and that's why the same but different.
This is a slightly random question.
That's fine.
But related, but a bit random. I was just wondering how Jackie is in our rehearsal room was how she was as a choreographer back in the day, also.
Yeah, she hasn't changed much, I don't think. No, I think she had the same interdiction. The thing that the whole Suzuki experience with Jackie, because Jackie and I both, Jackie's never worked with Suzuki, but she's studied under him, not in a direct sense or a formal sense, but she's been in the room watching Suzuki direct. And I'm talking about 3 hours a day for 5 weeks or so. It's very substantial. And she learnt then by watching Suzuki. She didn't understand a word he said because we don't speak Japanese. But she somehow sensed what he was talking about. So very much, well, this is an interesting point to raise actually, because the way she coaches actors is actually the way she coaches dancers. So she's looking for that unconscious energy which is coming out, which is about mining deep inside the self, which you would always done as a dancer, as a coach, because in fact you haven't got these words which are easy, they're not specific. The language of a développé is not specific, like syllables of a specific word.
Yeah.
So I guess you could say she's transmuted through watching Suzuki and feeling the way Suzuki would get stuff to actually that soul space that you get as an actor. And she's looking for utterance in the same way Suzuki's looking for utterance in words. Not words have meaning, they have expression of the soul. So she's looking for that very powerful, very, very visceral situation. And she was always like that as a dancer too, so no, it hasn't changed. But she's learnt through Suzuki how to transpose that to acting.
As a person who lives a spiritual journey, it's interesting that what you just said about Jackie looking for the person to go through the soul speak or whatever. That is a really challenging thing to do. And maybe this is that consciousness, what you can tap into or not, am I so blocked that it simply can't flow? Or what are my barriers, what are my things? Because if it was as easy as the soul speak, wow, why haven't I found it yet? Maybe I'm trying too hard.
Well, it's possible. I mean, we can't. Yeah, you can't. It's a long, slow journey. I would say so. I've achieved certain stages, but you don't get it all the time anyway. You have a sort of a, you know, there's peaks and troughs even, and people might come and watch you and I train and go, wow, they're pretty solid. They do this, you know, they're up to scratch every time. But in fact, we were going, well, actually, that was about 95%. That was about 90%. That was 100. This was so. What you find is you're sailing close to the wind, so to speak, about 90, bopping on about 98 of what the 100 would be, and the audience is getting 100, but you're not getting 100, I suppose. I can't answer that.
It reminds me of and kind of takes me back to the first question, which is part of the opening chapter around the few times that I feel like I've been communicating from the soul, or from something much greater than myself. And that was when I did The Tempest with Mercury's Wings. And there was a moment for me side stage before I was waiting to come back on. And I just went, these words have been spoken for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. Like the people who've spoken them around the world, you know, the energy that goes with those words was a real moment of going, it was a defining moment for me as a performer. And that was you know, amateur theatre, off stage, just before I'm about to go. I'm like, oh my God, so many people have been here right now. Not necessarily in that spot, but, you know, and the joy and what felt easy, I'm not sure if it appeared easy, but that those words of Ariel tumbled out of my mouth and how it felt to play that character was phenomenal.
Well, you're connecting with history too. You're connecting with all the people who've gone before you. You're connecting with a panorama of Shakespeare when he wrote them, and of course all the people who played those roles too. And there's something very, very affirming about that, because you're connecting with a sort of a world view, aren't you? You're connecting with and as you say, people of all sorts of languages and cultures and things like that. But the main thing about that value of that is that's giving you a knowledge point. You actually sort of really understood something very profound about yourself and your connection with the cosmos, which is the stuff that's gone before and the stuff that's going ahead. And you can't gainsay the importance of that. And that's going to have a profoundly valuable effect on you in any other show you do. So it's not just about that moment in that show. That's actually about how you take this experience and have, we call that epiphany, or I call it revelation, and we've all had those things. And once you know that, you're never going to look stupid again, because you know something. You really do know it, and that's something that's happened to you, not just as much as you thought of it, but you weren't expecting that to come along. You're standing there waiting to go on and do your stuff, and suddenly, wow, you're hit by a thought. Literally, you're hit by a thought or a feeling that actually comes from inside you. Because where else could it come from? But actually, it's also got this universal value too. So those sorts of revelations are both highly personal, but they're also universal. Because I'm sure, had I been there to witness, I would have said, well, that was a revelation. I could see something happen to you very profoundly, and you can't gainsay that, because we know once you know that, you actually never look stupid again, because you actually know something. And so you can go in front of an audience and go, I know this stuff. Now I might be good at promoting it. I might, take me a while to get my act together in terms of how do I deliver that. Yeah. But it's very definitely there, and you cannot. You've got to treasure those moments. We say that to all the actors. You've got to treasure that moment, because that's a keyhole into another world, isn't it? Yeah. You've actually opened another little door. Oh, there's something I can go through here, and there's more for me to explore, more for me. There's more pioneer space that I can actually discover. And how do you have similar revelations working with Suzuki in a different language in these ancient places? Well, I can't point to a revelation I had with Suzuki. I suppose there was one moment when I felt I got it right. There's only one moment, one scene, one part of the play that I was in that I got right. And I'm sure he felt that too, and that was the rehearsal we did before we went on stage. And I thought I got the balance between same. In retrospect, I didn't know what same and different was then. The same and difference really only 3 or 4 years old, and that was a way to solve a problem of the either or. I was trying to go from either or into both. And that's the issue. It's to move from sort of something binomial or Newtonian to something much more elastic with all its potential. So I'd say that was the only revelation I had with Suzuki. I can't remember any others. You can never predicate when they're going to happen, and you just don't. They'll just come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But I did have a sense I got it right once. And that's pretty hard. And I guess you have to understand that once you get it right once in rehearsal, then you'll never get the same in the show because there's lights, there's all sorts of other stuff going on that you'll never get the same, I don't think. Certainly I don't think I have. But you've still bumped up the whole thing to sort of 93, 94, 95, haven't you? And so even if you can't quite get to that, even the sort of the slightly the slightly second grade version is still pretty high value, I think.
Again, it's a retrospect thing, but I'm just interested in, revelations in terms of when you were dancing. Were they more often, or is it different because of the level of
I don't think I learned
factors involved?
I don't think.
Theatre?
Well, that's interesting. That's funny. I've got a story. This is an interesting story. We go sailing every year at these national championships in little boats, and they have these good Christmas parties or New Year's Eve party. We get up and dance around, and Jackie and I are sort of famous for being. Well, one year they said, okay, they sort of cleared the floor. Okay, John, get up and dance. They put on a bit of midnight oil or something. So I started just dancing around. And there's 40 or 50 people, maybe 60 or 70 people watching me. And they're all sort of clapping and stuff. It's like something out of a film. But the very funny thing is, as I'm sort of doing all this stuff, I said, this is the only time I feel like John Nobbs.
Yeah.
Literally, that came to me, and that was totally unexpected.
Yeah.
So I'd argue, yes, that's one, but that was actually just social dancing or, rock and roll stuff.
Yeah.
I've had other things, I suppose, a deep connection with the audience. I was playing this Godfather role in sort of a mafioso, sort of funny, humorous piece. And I got up there and sort of shaved, black tie and stuff, and did stuff. And they were clapping at me as I was doing this stuff. So that was, I don't know if that's a revelation, but that certainly feels one, because the whole audience is getting up and clapping. So, and that only happened about twice. But this other one's interesting, because actually literally at the same time as I'm doing this stuff, and in full performance mode, because I'm performing for all these ordinary people, some of whom are, they're all friends, but they're not. I actually said, this is the only time I feel like me. That's a revelation. And so that was pure unconscious, I suppose, born of obviously frenetic amounts of performative energy, which I always had. So I don't know. It's funny because I was always a very good dancer in that space of same and different, because I realise now I wasn't a great technician by any stretch, but I had interesting idiosyncratic style, hence this costume actually.
Oh yes, tell us about the costume.
We're doing
great segue.
We're doing a thing called Ha Ha Resurrection, which is actually a piece that I was in 1982, and I'm playing the same part, which is George, and Alicia's playing my secretary and also my wife. So we're actually in costume, hence the interesting makeup. We're playing ghosts who are sort of auditioning to be back in the part that we were back 37 years ago. So I suppose you could argue I always had these skills, and I had the ability to sort of not stare but look interesting. I was very good at that idea. And I know I always could look in such a way that stuff was coming into me rather than stare. So I had that thing. I always had that stuff. And I never knew I had it, of course, but people used to say I had it. And that was my success as a performer, is to have that type of energy, that sort of same and different, actually it turns out. And in fact, the solo that I did, that this is from, is actually a solo which is sort of like a bit of a rap dance solo. And when I learned it, everybody said, oh, that's great, that's really cool. It still looks pretty good. It's actually up there behind us now, as we speak. But then I tried to do it harder. I tried to do it better. I tried to put more into it. And people said, oh, it's not as good as it used to be. So I thought, well, I better sort of to work at what that meant. So I had to move into sort of type of automatic pilot where I wasn't trying too hard. And once again, it's the same but different because I had to do the same stuff. But I had to sort of look a bit feel. I had to be more casual about it. I had to not push it too hard. There's a whole series of those things there. So that was a big learning experience for me because I had something which was actually very delicate, very throwaway, very casual. And if you did it too much, it actually lost that that ambiguity or pluralism. So I had to really go, okay, well, I just have to go and coast through this and not do it properly, just mark it. And as soon as I did that, I got back to some sort of thing that looked fine again, but I really had to learn. So maybe I knew all that stuff, and maybe all this stuff I always knew, but have actually articulated for the very first time. So
how does it feel to do the dance now?
I can't do
or
it.
Moments thereof.
Oh, it's good. I don't think I can do it as well as I could before. I've lost the facility, so I'm not.
Yeah.
Even though it's not, I can't do it like I could before. I don't think I'm up to it, even though it's a very casual piece.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I'm now looking at it differently from the perspective of directing it in such a way as how do I marry us figures here on this little thing, do that here with that green screen behind. So it's become a different thing. And of course, you can't go back to what you were doing, but how do you capture the essence of it? And does the essence still live? I guess.
So I've been thinking about, and in reading the chapter, about the, how did I write it? The benefit of resources. So you talk about, in this chapter particularly, talking about the ongoing training or the absolute detail that Suzuki would put into doing his shows. And I wonder if that's about the privilege of resources. I wonder if same but different through the training is a privilege of time, because we have access to a space, even though we probably don't have it as much as we'd still really like to.
Of course. And not like Suzuki has, because he's got literally...
He's built a
well, he's got
small
several
place.
theatres, but he's also got amazing time because he's actually... I've seen 5 versions of King Lear. Maybe there's another 2 since then. Maybe there's 7 versions, all of which are same but different. I mean, they really are... They're evolutions of the same thing. He hasn't dropped everything and sort of chucked the baby out with the bathwater and started afresh. He's always evolving it, moving it forward into that sort of accumulation zone. So, and that's a fraction of time because he's got the same guys there, and they're trained. I'm not sure if they train every day because I don't know if you can keep it up. It's just too intense. They certainly do a bit of a warm-up every day, and then they would actually do the rehearsals. So, and he's always had the deep interest, curiosity to actually say, I'm going to just play again, and I'm going to make it better. Or I'm going to make it more something. I'm going to change it. But it always implies it keeps the same characteristics because that's an archetype, isn't it? The same thing is an archetype. How do I take this thing? He did a thing called Kachikachiyama. And it's it's a pantomime. It's about a tanuki, which is like a little sort of raccoon, sort of Japanese raccoon, and the rabbit. The tanuki has actually killed the rabbit's parents, and it's about how the rabbit exacts his revenge. So he often will have the tanuki as sort of gangsters, maybe yakuza gangsters, and they're sort of animals and wild, and the nurses will be rabbits, or the rabbits will be nurses, and so there's this interesting sort of male-female dimorphism. But the main thing is you have these two of the gangster moles for the yakuza guys are sort of pouring sake and essentially geisha girls, right? So that's pretty cool, and they're pretty sexy and whatever. Then the next year he's replaced those 2 girls with a couple of guys who aren't gay but are very, 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 very attractively put together, so to speak. And you think, that's amazing. He's actually relinquishing what most people aspire to. And once again, it's actually the same stuff, but it's actually different again. So he's got they haven't supplanted the girls. They've taken the history of the girls, I suppose, and actually added something else. There's another example, is the Bacchae. He did a thing called the Bacchae, which then became the Dionysus. Now, I've only seen this on video because, in fact, he stopped doing it in 1987 when a man was the no guy. What was his name? Kanzi. The Kanzi brothers. There's two Kanzi brothers who both, and one played the Dionysus figure, and it's an astonishing piece. And there's a dancing girl in it who's probably a Buto dance who does this spastic dance. It's the wickedest thing you've ever seen. It's really wicked. And yet, when Hideo Kanza died, I think it's Hideo.
I'm looking for it.
Is it Hideo or Hideo? I can't remember. When he died, he just shelved the whole thing. And this dance this girl does is a sensational piece of wicked dancing, and he's quite prepared to just move forward. So, but what I'm making is that the spirit of the new thing, it keeps the spirit of the old thing inside it by definition, really, because it is an evolution. It's an accumulation. It's not a substitution. So effectively, what we're talking about is multiplication, not even addition. Something times something else, and you can see when Alicia trains, there's things going on which aren't just stacking, they're actually multiplying by each other. So that's actually, that zone's incredibly creative and incredibly compelling to watch, because it seems to be going faster. It seems to be going somewhere it might not even be going, but it actually has this appearance of growth. And even so, it's the same. I guess another instance where we talk about this idea of same and different is to say, we do an exercise, we might sort of be still one thing and then move one arm like that. And we don't just keep that still, we make it actually stiller. So as this actually gets stiller as this is moving. So that's another example of same and different, isn't it?
It's everywhere.
It's everywhere. What you
It
said.
is everywhere.
Well, it's an attitude, isn't it? It's a state of mind. I'm not just going to be the same as I was before, but I'm not just going to be different. I'm going to be two things. I'm going to keep my core essence of who I am as a human being, which I was born with, which my mother and father gave me in the first years of my life. But then I'm going to move forward too. I'm actually going to be, I'm going to go into my own adult. So I've got part of my parents' heritage, genetic heritage, or even social heritage, and I'm going to move forward into another space as well. So I'm keeping stuff, but also adding stuff to it. And as a psyche, you can't afford to sort of deny part of yourself. It's not good for you. This is part of what you've made you, and you've got to deal with it and actually keep dealing with it as you add to it.
I just found a little note, which may be going a bit backwards, but I wrote around, often in this room we talk about feeling. Feel it. How did it feel? How did it feel? And it's probably, it is a direct reference to my own experience, but if you're programmed your life not to feel, then being able to simply feel is quite a challenging thing to do.
You say you're programmed not to feel.
Yeah.
You say that you are programmed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I think there's a difference between emotion and actual feeling.
I guess so, yeah. I mean, we don't talk about feelings as in feel happy or sad so much as a profound sensitivity to what your body is and what your mind is and what your imagination, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Why do you say you're programmed not to feel then?
Well,
what does that mean?
I just know that's the thing that I struggle most with.
But somebody hasn't done it to you. That's something you've programmed yourself.
I don't know the answer.
Have you done it to protect yourself from something?
Oh, it's most definitely that.
Right.
Yeah.
We don't get into the psychology stuff.
Yeah, no, this
I'm not a psychologist,
just a
and it's not about mental health. It's about creating performance with transformational.
Yes.
And the relationship with the performance and their transformational aspect. Their relationship with the audience, I should say.
Yeah.
So
there's something about
I'm not trying to analyse
training. Makes you more adept at feeling your internal workings of the body. The mechanics of the body. I literally mean that type of feeling.
Yeah. So it's up to the actor as to how they balance out the feeling and the thinking, I suppose. And the feeling can't obviously overwhelm the thinking, because then you can't survive. So you work out how do you have these powerful feelings, but you don't have to take them home with you. This is an office. It's a space in which you actually address those things, and you don't have to live in 24/7. We don't say you can't, but we're certainly not encouraging people to do that. We're saying up to you, because you also have to live. You have to have children. You have to have husbands and do all those things too. So it's not about excluding those things. It's about making sure that you've got a parallel world, which is parallel to the real world. Your imagination world is parallel and congruent with, but it's not the same thing, and it's neither overwhelming or being overwhelmed by.
Same and different.
Same and different.
There was an interesting part that I found. One of the small titles you have here is Itchy Nitchy, Day by Day. And I have some questions just next to it that say, do we have an Australian equivalent? We often talk about, the difference of Australian culture and Japanese culture. Do we have an Australian equivalent? Why or why not? And where does that come from, if we do or if we don't?
I don't think we do, actually. Well, we do, because we've actually imported that attitude from the Suzuki. Australia's a country that's about space, and Japan's a country about time. So they understand time very well. And you'll see bonsai trees that are 700 years old. I mean, that's generations of people who've done that. Now, you've got indigenous heritage, so I'm not going to go into that, but that's how you've got to deal with that, I suppose, in a way, which is another concept of time, which is even longer. But Australians are very good at space. Australians are great at eating space. I mean, when I was dancing in London in the 70s, you'd have people come into these studios with lots of people, and they say, I want to see all the Australian dancers. You'd literally see that, because they wanted these guys. And Australian dancers probably didn't have the finesse of European dancers, but they had this tremendous spatial quality. I mean, Australian tennis players, 6 of the top 10 was of Australians. And Australian cricket has always been amazing. So they understand space, but they don't really get time. So one of the reasons we've been so keen to keep this relationship with Suzuki and Japanese high thought going is this idea of using time as much as we can. So we haven't got an itchy, because that comes from a part of the book where I went to Fueda, who's one of Suzuki's top actors, and said, well, how do you do this? He says, well, you just got to keep doing it. The Japanese won't tell you how to do anything. They'll say, just do it again. Muskoshi, it's difficult. Do it again. Do it again. And so they've got this idea of water dripping on a stone. This time. And that's about time. We're in a bit of a hurry, I suppose, to get space done. So, but the advantage for us is we can import that temporal quality into our work and know that you've been training for 14 years and you'll probably be trained for another 10 years. So we talk about a long time, and for Australians that's a massive amount of time. Most Australians wouldn't have a clue what that meant. So it's given us a type of characteristic, a type of attitude or philosophical bent which allows us to actually think much more elastically about the sort of thing we do. We're not in a hurry. And we see, not only not in a hurry, but we see all these performances we do, the film we're making now, the films we've done before, Plimplin, and the live shows like Mangi Ulysses, in terms of Alicia's thing, they're signposts on a journey which is actually a long artistic sense of self-discovery, isn't it? Long. And each one of these, they're not super important on their own, but they're important for what they tell about where we were when we were then. So that's beautiful, really. So it's no show's a make or break. No show's sort of the big one. And we are marrying the temporal, and Japan is the most temporal culture in the world. there's no other culture that's about its time as much as, say, Japan is.
And what is that? Is that just because excellent historical records, or what is
Well, they
that?
have things like, see, the Japanese have got a mountain in Japan where the souls of all the Japanese who've ever lived go there. So they don't go to heaven, they all go to this spot. And of course, you think about that, that's accumulation. So all these soul space. And this is an attitude rather than a real thing.
And essentially then that is the same, and that's often a thing why I think I enjoy this so much, is about the spirituality of Aboriginal culture. It's the same kind of deal. You know, we're all here unless our remains are somewhere else. But it's all there, and that's what the power is.
And we should probably think about that a fair bit more, you know, as we become more multicultural, we have these other influences. And especially how we sort of read the Indigenous history, Aboriginal history, how we try and work out how to put that in. Because in a way, it's so far removed from the European thing that it's very hard to find a bridge for it, doesn't it? Which I guess is your job.
Yeah, that's my job. That's what I do. That's what I figure out. I think for the first go, that's what I've got for you. But I think that if we could have another